You're listening to the Digital Deep Dive, where we tackle the newest trends, strategies, and pain points shaping growth across the digital landscape. From Amazon and D2C to international expansion, join our host and e-commerce leaders across multiple industries for in-depth discussions on how to maximize your brands in the digital arena. Now, here's your host, Aaron Conant.
Thank you for joining us today. I want to kind of jump into this topic that we want to cover. Is called the Amazon dilemma. And we got a great friend, partner, actually a supporter of the BWG Connect network for ever since we got started here, John Ghiorso. He's a founder and CEO at Orca Pacific. It's the now an e-commerce division of Media Monks, just all around great person. And I was having a fantastic conversation with him last week around this topic of Amazon and how to view Amazon. And so it was just an all around great conversation. And he agreed to jump on the line today and kind of walk through, what he's seeing inside organizations as a whole of how you should view Amazon. But John, if you want to jump in, a brief intro on yourself, and the company as a whole, that'd be awesome. And then we can kind of jump into the conversation. Sound good?
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. Appreciate it. So just kind of quick history on myself and the company. So a little over a decade ago, started a company called Orca Pacific. Fast forward to today, we are now part of Media Monks, which is a 8,000 person strong global marketing services firm. We have around 100 people focused in the e-commerce division. So focused on strategy, consulting, paid media, content across Amazon and other e-commerce channels, both in North America as well as globally. So that's kind of the quick view, and then happy to get into the meat of it from there.
Yeah, so let's jump in, because this conversation, just to set the groundwork for everybody, was around companies as a whole. Especially if we look at the start of the pandemic, a lot of people jump full force into Amazon. Right. And there's a lot of, angst going on within organizations as a whole. And so John and I were talking about how people solve that. And John had just brought up the fact that, the organizations need to view Amazon not as a retailer, but more as a platform. And so that was kind of this dilemma discussion that we got into. But, John, if you want to just kind of elaborate your thoughts behind Amazon and viewing them as a platform, we can kind of get into implications for business as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I still think a lot of brands, because of the legacy of retail, ultimately consumer product brands, with the exception of the digitally native folks, have been set up to sell to retail. And, whether it's 10, 20, 30, 100 years, that's kind of the DNA of most consumer product companies. So they naturally put Amazon on a list of retailers, Amazon, Walmart, Costco, go down the list. And they approach Amazon in a similar way from kind of a macro perspective. They see them as a retailer, they see them as a customer, et cetera. The problem with that is Amazon, one, can be really not optimal in terms of a retailer or customer. I often hear that Amazon is not a good customer. And I think that's true in a lot of cases when you compare them to their, top 10 retailer peers. But I think there's a fundamental shift in the way that a consumer product company can view Amazon. And if they start to view them as something that is closer to Facebook or Google or Salesforce as a technology platform versus comparing them to, Costco, Walmart, Target, go down the list, I think they're going to get a lot more benefit out of the relationship, and they'll also prevent a lot of frustration and kind of banging their heads against a wall.
Yeah, I love it, because even from the standpoint of negotiations as a whole, right? Amazon's not a partner, right? It's like, that's exactly it, right? They think that you're going to go in there and you're going to talk like you would to a Walmart. and they're going to partner with you. I mean, it's like the co-op spend, right? At a traditional retailer, you give them money and you figure out a way to use that money to enhance the relationship and you sell more product. But that marketing co-op with Amazon, they just put it in their pocket.
Yeah.
Right. And then everything else stems from there. And so it is shifting that mindset of, when people say, hey, they're not coming to the table, like, yeah, Facebook and Google don't come to the table.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that's right. And I think one of the big misconceptions or potential misconceptions when I say this is that I mean that Amazon, that people don't matter, relationships don't matter. And that's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that if you have a foundational approach of viewing Amazon as this technology platform through which you can accomplish a tremendous amount of incremental goals, like you can do things on Amazon that because of the reach, the scale, the technology, the access, the data that they have, you cannot do anywhere else. You literally cannot do on Google. You cannot do on Walmart. You cannot do on Costco. So you can do a tremendous amount, but you need to view them foundationally as a platform. And then if you can layer on top of that relationships and partnerships and, one-off testing new betas and jointly rolling out new products with Amazon, I mean, all of that can exist, but that needs to be kind of icing on the cake stuff. And oftentimes that's inverted, where companies go in and they say, what we really need to do is we need to get this vendor manager on our side. We need to take them out to dinner more. We need to convince them that our products are better than our competitors. We need to sort of do what you would do at any of these other big retailers. That is a foundational approach. And then you're missing all of the sort of programmatic pass through, scaled, more sort of platform elements. Both of those things can have merit, but you've got to get the order right and set one is the 80% of your focus foundation and the other is kind of the 20% icing on the cake. So
no, it's super interesting because, if you think about it from the standpoint, if people right now, so I talk to, 30 or 40 brands a week and, are walking through their different plans. It's like, well, how do I invest more in TikTok? How do I invest more in Facebook or in Google? What are the new things they're launching? There's going to be live streaming that comes out. A lot of that is wrapped up in different ways in Amazon, but they're open to experimenting in all these different ways on these other platforms. But you're right, when it comes to Amazon, it's more of the, well, exactly, what are you going to give me, Amazon, if I start doing all these things as opposed to a different approach? And do you think that that's like why some brands just take over Amazon and just ramp it up? Is it that simple of a mindset shift of, hey, how can I maximize Amazon for who they are?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's simple at the highest level. I think it's very complicated and actually very hard to do when you're running up against an organization whose DNA is fundamentally in the, supplier retailer game. So it's not easy, but from the highest level view, I do think when you ultimately separate the folks that are kind of keeping up with category growth or even not quite keeping up and losing share versus the ones that are growing at 60, 100, 200, 300% year over year, the latter bucket really are those companies that understand this platform concept. And the other thing they understand, and it goes along with this, is that retailers have a fairly predictable and limited upside. If you get, full placement in Target and you get, however many SKUs and 2 feet of shelf space or however you capture that, obviously that's a big win. That's a lot of volume for your company. But it's still relatively fixed. Let's say Target, anyone can do this math, right? They have a certain amount of stores. They have a certain amount of foot traffic. There's a certain amount of foot traffic in that aisle. You have X amount of space in the aisle. Your competitors did this much volume. You're not going to do 10X the volume when you boot out your competitor and get placement than they did, right? Maybe you'll do 30% more. Maybe you'll do 30% less. Not that it's not important. It is, but it's not that variable. The difference on Amazon is that you can come into a category that is, distributed across 15 brands that capture 80% of the volume, and you can within 2 years capture 70% of the entire category. Or if you don't think about it and share, you can triple the size of that category on Amazon and reap the benefits of that within your brand. So, there's still this thinking of like this kind of fixed environment, because retail is fundamentally linked to physical spaces that can't flex and adjust. Where Amazon is it's ephemeral, it's completely flexible. So ultimately, what you are limited by on Amazon is the 80% of, and I'm talking US right now to make it easier, but in the US, you're essentially limited to the fact that they have 80% and not 100% of American households engaging in their platform. So whatever that means for your category, that is the upside. The upside is basically everything and everybody, and it's up to you to connect those dots. Now, the inverse of that is there's no floor, right? So just because you're national brand X and you have 30% of your category nationally, that doesn't mean you automatically get 30% on Amazon. It doesn't even mean you automatically get 20. You can have 2 or 1 or nothing, depending on how well you do and how much you focus and the effort you put in and the budget and all these other things. So again, there's an upside and a downside to this, but the amount of variability inherent in this platform versus looking at it as more of this fixed environment retailer, that's a super critical element of this to understand as well. And again, those brands that knock it out of the park understand that their upside is really only limited to their own effort, not to, the 4 walls of the building.
Yeah. And I'd also say just in their approach as a whole as well, when you view it differently, right? You're not just viewing it from the standpoint of, hey, go out there, talk to them. Like you're saying, take them out to dinner. Don't get me wrong. They'll go out to dinner with you. They'll take the free dinner. Who wouldn't, right? It's usually at a pretty nice restaurant. But it's really fundamentally, how are you utilizing the platform for how it was designed and working with your vendor manager? Because I get this question a lot. It's like, oh, my vendor manager doesn't really understand retail, doesn't really understand what's going on or sales or margin or anything. He's like, yeah, but I don't necessarily know that your Google, your Facebook, contact does either.
Yeah.
I think internally, it's those companies that not only viewing it the right way, but is staffed the right way. And then the third part is, how are you communicating that upstream, right? Because a lot of times we have, people, they're actually managing the account, or maybe they're managing the agency that has the account, and they're trying to answer questions and explain the craziness of Amazon, upstream.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
what does that engagement looks like for, somebody sitting out there and needs to explain it to upper management?
Yeah.
Like, hey, hit the reset button on this.
I think that's one of the biggest keys to this conversation, because I think my guess is most of the people listening to this podcast are in agreement with this. I mean, I don't know if we're blowing anyone's mind here with this idea. I think a lot of people who are already in this kind of still niche a little bit of e-commerce, they're probably the evangelist in their own company. So if they were the king of whatever company they're working for, this probably wouldn't be an issue. But the fact is, everyone works inside of a larger company. So then it's, how do you convince the CFO, the CEO, the VP, whoever it is that ultimately kind of, is going to control a lot of these things. And I think what you have to look at is, can you bring this platform discussion into a broader digital transformation discussion, which I know a lot of consumer product companies are going through now, and they have since COVID started. I think that can be one kind of successful strategy. And then, how, and this is something we help our clients with, or how do we help arm our direct contacts with resources, talking points, data, so that they can go back into their organization and be the evangelist, but in a way that actually, can change some of the way that these legacy processes are implemented with regard to Amazon. So, a good example of that is budgeting is something that I see holding a lot of brands back. They're using traditional retail budgeting processes instead of a performance-driven budget process to determine how much they should spend on sponsored ads, for example. So they're still looking at it with this kind of fixed pie mindset and saying, well, the business is worth $40 million, so we can spend, X percentage of that. So there's your budget. And it's like, yeah, but the business could be worth 200 million. But if you don't unlock a budget in a performance-based way, you run into this chicken and egg problem where the budget's not big enough to drive a $200 million business because you don't have a $200 million business, but you don't have it because you don't have the budget, et cetera. So, how do you actually make the argument that this is not something we're just inventing and making up as we go along? This is something that, we've done with dozens, hundreds of brands and have been successful. And then, can we help arm our clients and direct points of contact with that information so they can start creating that change within their organization to unlock more potential on the platform?
Yeah, I mean, because the potential there, right, is in some cases self-limiting, right? I'm not going to spend more until I make more.
Yeah.
Well, you're not relying on Amazon to drive more traffic. Like traditionally, you'd rely on a retailer to drive more traffic to the store to help sell more. But in this case, you're almost self-limiting. And that's where I think a lot of brands are able to, I'd say smaller brands build themselves on Amazon, is their willingness to over-index on spend because they know on the back end there is unlimited, potential to capture people.
Yeah. The reason that digitally native brands do better on Amazon is because they don't know any better, right? They don't know that you're supposed to do budgeting in this way and you're supposed to look at, they don't have any of that legacy. It also means they're not probably going to do as well at traditional retail, right? A lot of them, and that's fine. But living on Amazon, this sort of platform concept is just like, well, of course it's that way. It's like a 10-year-old using an iPad. Like, what do you mean you can't? There used to be a world in which iPads didn't exist. You couldn't use the internet. Like, it's just kind of native to them, I guess, literally. But, and it's just this concept of kind of unlimited upside and your destiny is in your own hands. And, I probably shouldn't get too into this, but, there can be egos involved in this as well sometimes where, there's this mindset of, well, Amazon's not a very good customer. Costco's a better customer. Target's a better customer. So we're going to focus more effort there. And, I think it's like, it doesn't matter. There is no monolithic Amazon that thinks this or that of your brand. Like, there is no, even your vendor manager, they're going to turn over every 12 months. The DMM is going to turn over every 18 to 24. Category leader, maybe they're longer, but it still doesn't really matter that much what they do or don't think of you or your products or your company or where you should or shouldn't fit on the platform. It's really up to you to kind of create your own destiny. And, you have to operate really in this kind of no excuses mindset because there's really no one to blame besides yourself for your success or lack thereof on the platform. So
is there any like key advice you'd give, or let me phrase it different ways. What do you see? This might even better. So 2 things, key advice for people in how they're dealing with Amazon today. The other one is, what should people be thinking about, over the next 6 to 12 months with Amazon? It's changing so fast. I mean, people are trying to stay on top of everything that's going on. So we'd love to hear your thoughts.
So, a couple things in kind of no particular order. One is move to a performance-based budgeting. And there's multiple ways of doing this, right? But essentially the idea that you're going to determine your budget based on the ROI, not based on some kind of fixed pie or pre-scripted way of doing things. Easier said than done. I get that. There's a lot of legacy budgeting systems in place that you have to try to break or circumvent, but that's a big one. That's a big unlock. Test and learn, I think, is a very good mindset with Amazon. There's all these new betas. I mean, Amazon is coming out with more betas, more new programs across the site, related to advertising, content, merchandising, video. Test and learn. Don't put a ton of resources into any one, but test those. Just some aren't going to work. Be okay with that. Abandon them. Some are going to work. Double down. Do better. Double down again. I think that's
really quick on that one. Do you see people putting in place like an R&D budget? Because that's what my background, I'm a scientist, right? I think of everything in this case as R&D. You're going to lose on a bunch of these, and then on some of them, you're just really going to hit. And the first mover advantage on Amazon is one of the clearest ones out there. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I haven't seen that really formalized in the concept of an R&D budget, but I think, there are definitely some brands more than others that kind of embrace this mindset. Usually it just gets funded out of a general marketing budget. And it's just kind of this concept of like, hey, this is all marketing stuff, even if it's not really technically marketing, it tends to come out of that, or a sales budget. And we're just going to like try these 7 things this year. Keep in mind too, that even Amazon moves so fast that even annual budgeting is tricky, because they might come out with a new beta in July that's really cool and like is really in the sweet spot of your product. And, if you didn't budget for that, that can be tricky. But again, I think I don't recommend spending like a ton of money on any one of these new bets, because there's a lot of them that aren't going to work, either because the program itself isn't very good, or because it just it's not a fit for your product or your product category. But I think just embracing that, however you have to structure it, is worth doing. Another concept is that there's always more upside for your top sellers. So I think there's often this kind of mindset of, we have 1,000 products and there's 200 that do well, and then there's 20 that do really, really well. And that the 20 that do really well, we're good on those. We can kind of just, set it and forget it and let them go. Sometimes that is the case. Sometimes they're kind of legacy products, they don't have much life left in them. They're going to get leapfrogged in terms of features, benefits by you or your competitor. So that's fine. But a lot of the time, there's more upside even with your top sellers, unless you literally have a product that is number 1 in search for the top 10 keywords. Then good for you, like let it ride. But that's very rarely the case. Even the top sellers for top brands and categories almost always have more upside for different keywords. Maybe they're number 2 instead of number 1. There's almost always an ability to drive more volume. The relevancy ranking on Amazon is largely based on the way that consumers interact with the product. So that is it's not arbitrary. It's not Amazon's view of what should or shouldn't be ranked higher. It really is an aggregated view of how customers perceive that product. So what you want to lean in on is products that are already well received by customers. And I've seen a lot of volume gain by doing that. So that's also something I would look at. Focus less on kind of peanut buttering your approach across your catalog, because you have, 800 out of 1,000 items don't sell very well. That's okay. Like, you're always going to have a long tail. So I would at least test the idea of doubling down on top sellers and see how that goes.
Love it. I love it. So, as we kind of wrap this one up, and John, would love to have you back on for future ones as well. There's about 15 other questions I'd love to ask, but just to keep these in the 20 to 30 minute time frame, I think we can go ahead and start to wrap this one up. I mean, just some of the key things that I was taking away. Obviously, viewing Amazon as a platform, not as a direct like traditional retailer. Performance-based budgeting, something I think a lot of people need to consider. Testing and learning, incredibly important. Trying the new beta programs that are out there, but also doing it in a controlled manner, not just dumping tons of money on it. Then the focus on those top sellers and growing it from there. So all around fantastic stuff. Any like last minute, I mean, obviously, if anybody is ever looking for any kind of help whatsoever with Amazon, John and the team he built over at Orca Pacific, they're just crushing it for a ton of brands. Just come highly recommended from our network as a whole. John, how do people get a hold of you as we wrap up here?
Yeah, so you can go to our website, orcapac, orcapac.com, and see, get more info on what we do and reach out to us if you want. Happy to connect with anyone on LinkedIn as well. I'm pretty active there. John Ghiorso, there's only one of me, I think. And like I said, I think there's always more upside than brands realize, and we're happy to help connect those dots on behalf of our clients.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thanks again, John, for your time today, being so willing to share your insights, your experiences, and how you're helping tons of people out there today. It also, as always, you're kind of forward thinking in how you view Amazon as a whole and its overall potential. And with that, I think we're going to wrap up this episode. Again, I'm Aaron Conan. Thanks for joining us. I look forward to continuing our digital journey together. If you have any topics you'd like to share, always feel free to drop us a line at topics@bwgconnect.com. Look forward to continuing this journey together. Everybody have a great day.